did have some rapid testing kits for COVID-19. How would you feel about these existing and opening up a lot more opportunities to go to things like concerts, like sporting events, like weddings, if there was a rapid test that you could take right on the spot, swab the cheek, whatever it's going to be, and you get your results in no time. Negative, okay, you're in. Positive, well, now you know, and now you got to go deal with it and do all the isolation and whatnot. I think that would be a huge step, especially if a vaccine is uncertain right now. We don't know really the timeline. We might have an approximate idea, but we're going to talk right now to University of Ottawa's Dr. Raywat Deonandan, who's been on the show before. I always enjoy having him on, and I'm a big, big fan of his Twitter as well. Good morning, Doctor. It's great to have you on as always.
Good morning. Thanks for plugging in my Twitter.
I'm a big, big fan. Now, you are saying that we may have made some mistakes right off the top as far as, we should have closed the borders a bit earlier, should have mandated mask wearing a bit earlier, should have compelled provinces to stop March break travel a little bit earlier. Where do you think we should go from here to start to make some of these mistakes good?
Test, and more testing. Absolutely. Now, there was an article in National Post earlier written by some infectious disease doctors about how we should be doing more symptomatic testing and less asymptomatic testing. I see their point, and I don't fully agree with it, but the overall point that we need more strategic testing is certainly valid, and we need to increase testing capacity, which also means buying more tests and getting new testing technologies. So they're coming at us fast and furiously on the market, and Canada needs to, get some of those quickly and start deploying them and testing them.
Now, how close are we to I hear that it's kind of in the works to having some kind of rapid at-home testing kit, and what would this kit possibly look like?
Okay, so remember back in May, there was some talk about getting an on-site test from Spartan Biosciences, and that didn't quite pan out. And ever since then, there have been a number of products that haven't quite panned out. Around the world, there are some at-home tests. Again, they're not quite panning out. So there are at-home tests, there are rapid tests, and there are on-site tests, and they're not all the same. It is possible, for example, to simply mail people a swab and have you swab yourself and you mail it to a lab and it's tested that way. That's an at-home test. That's not what we mean, though. What we mean is like you spit on a thing and it changes color and it lets you know if you're likely positive or not. We're pretty close to that, actually. The problem is that it requires, it has low sensitivity and low specificity relative to other tests, and so it may cause some confusion. So it's a matter of choosing the right one and figuring out how to deploy it. We're closer to having the spit test that you send to a lab, right? So it's easier than a swab, and kids don't like the swab. Who does? And we're even close to having like an on-site test where a nurse would stick a thing in your nose and stick it in a test tube and knows within 15 minutes whether or not you're positive or not. Doesn't have to go to a lab. So those are three different modalities of new testing that are available or soon to be available.
Right, yeah, I am definitely for the saliva test. I'm not a big fan of anything getting shoved up my nose either. It's just not a good look for me. But do you think it would get to the case where if they did want to start opening up a few more public places, like venues, like events that would have a bigger crowd, could it come down to getting a test at the door, a rapid test, rapid response test to see if you are negative or positive? Could we get to that point?
I used to think that was the case. I'm not so sure anymore because any rapid test doesn't have perfect sensitivity, meaning that you're going to get a lot of false positives and false negatives, which is okay depending upon how you use them. If you're using them to screen people before they get into a venue, it's a little problematic because you're going to get a lot of people who think they're negative but who aren't. But if you're using them to sort of tell people whether or not they should go and get tested further, then it's useful. Kind of like, the digital rectal exam for prostate cancer. It's not pleasant, but if you find something, then you go for like the biopsy later on to confirm it. So think of it like that. It's a screening test. It's not a test to let you into a venue.
Okay, gotcha. Do we know much, too? I hear about this, too. I don't know what's rumor and what isn't because there's so much misinformation out there. I like to speak with actual doctors who know what they're talking about. Where are we as far as antibody testing goes? Are we able to test if we have antibodies in us yet? How does that work?
Yeah, so there are a number of antibody tests on the market. Canada has okayed, I think, one or two, but they're being used for mostly research purposes, and from now this point on, I think people will get it if they have some sort of medical condition that warrants testing for a variety of reasons. So the average citizen just can't walk into the doctor's office and say, I want to test to figure out if I was exposed, unfortunately. So what it tests for, it tests to see if you've been likely exposed to the disease sometime in the past. That's it.
Okay, good. That's good to know. Also, I was going to ask you, we're seeing some numbers that we don't really want to be seeing right now. I believe Ontario announced yesterday 200 new cases. Is this kind of the beginning of a landslide? Are we getting too lax, or is this the start of that second wave that everyone was saying was going to happen in the fall?
We are definitely getting too lax, and we're entering dangerous territory, meaning a number of things are happening at the same time. Number one, schools are opening, and schools are pandemic accelerators. Most kids will be just fine, but occasionally you're going to get some school flare-ups that cause spikes in numbers. Number two, the weather is getting cold, so people are going inside and not distancing as much. Number three, the humidity is dropping, so the droplets are traveling a little further. And number four, we're entering cold and flu season, which is going to cause a fair amount of chaos. So is it the second wave? I don't know. Possibly, but I don't think so. I think more likely what we're seeing is the hammer and the dance. So early on in this pandemic, we hammered down cases by locking down. Now we've got to dance as the caseload goes up and down in response to our public health strategies and economic openings. So we've got to buckle in. We're in this for the long haul, and we're going to see cases rise. We have to do our part, meaning don't go to that house party. You don't have to do that.
Right.
Just wear your mask and keep your distance.
Absolutely. And whereabouts are we? I mean, there, again, a lot of misinformation about this as well. Vaccine trial, I know it was put on pause, the AstraZeneca vaccine trial. One woman reported neurological symptoms. Where do we stand? Do we know what it was that happened there, and how far along are we in our research, or how close are we to a vaccine?
So that trial is back on. The pause has been lifted, which is good news. So I don't know what the details were.
Yeah.
We thought she had transverse myelitis, which is possible she had it beforehand. It's possible she was in the control group. It's possible it's unrelated to the vaccine entirely. I do know that the trial coordinators feel that it was safe enough to continue, which is good. How far along are we? We'll probably get data from this phase 3 trials by the end of this year, which means that if it's good, we can get deployment of the vaccine by early next year. So I don't like making predictions, but I will. I think that a vaccine, at least a tepid one, will be available to most of the world by the middle of next year, which means that we'll be in a position to declare the pandemic over by the beginning of 2022, if not the end of 2021.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Now, do you think, too, one more question, I know you probably don't have a crystal ball, you can't say this, but would they make something like that mandatory? Because that's where I think a lot of people have a problem with it, or would it just be available to everyone the way the flu shot is?
I don't think in our society we can make that mandatory. We can make it required
Right.
for certain activities, like to go to school or to go to work or something, which is almost akin to being mandatory. But I don't see that happening with that public outrage. But I think most people will get it. I think about 80% of people will choose to get it, depending upon its profile.
Right. Dr. Deonandan, it is always a pleasure. Like I said, love your Twitter, Deonandan on Twitter. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you very much.